Dr. Amos surveyed his pride and joy through reinforced glass, and, oh, what a sight it was! 15 years of genetic tampering, hormone manipulation, and enough government funding to buy a small country had produced, well, children. Enhanced children, sure, but still children who needed juice boxes, and occasionally threw tantrums when their neural inhibitors malfunctioned during nap time. The good doctor had convinced himself he was crafting the future of human evolution. The reality? He was running what amounted to the galaxy's most expensive daycare center, complete with security guards who carried enough firepower to level a city block. Because nothing says scientific breakthrough quite like needing a small army to babysit your test subjects. Subject 31 shows remarkable tactical reasoning, Amos muttered into his recorder, watching 10-year-old Dante manipulate holographic battle scenarios with the casual ease of someone solving a crossword puzzle. The boy's enhanced neural pathways processed information at speeds that made quantum computers look sluggish, but right now he was using that considerable brain power to figure out how to steal cookies from the commissary without triggering motion sensors. The irony was lost on Amos, of course. He'd created beings with intelligence that dwarfed his own, then acted surprised when they started questioning why they lived in cages. "Doctor," his assistant Heidi approached with the nervous energy of someone who'd seen too many science fiction movies, "Subject 28 is, well, she's doing that thing again." Brooke sat cross-legged in her containment pod, fingers dancing through holographic interfaces that shouldn't have existed in her sterile room. The 12-year-old had somehow convinced the facility's supposedly unhackable quantum encryption to roll over and play dead, and was now casually browsing through files that made grown security specialists weep into their coffee. "How is she accessing classified networks?" Amos demanded, though part of him felt a twisted pride. After all, Brooke was his creation, his masterpiece of enhanced cognitive function and pattern recognition. "We don't know, sir. She keeps telling us it's because the firewall asked nicely, and that computers just want to be friends." Amos pressed his palm against his forehead. Enhanced intelligence was supposed to create super soldiers, not super hackers, with the social skills of someone who'd learned human interaction from badly translated instruction manuals. In Pod C, Camden was doing something that could generously be called exercise, but looked more like he was attempting to bench press a small building. The 14-year-old's enhanced musculature could probably punch through tank armor, yet he spent most of his time reading poetry and asking uncomfortable questions about why the lab never had visiting hours. "The specimens are developing beyond parameters," Heidi continued, consulting her tablet with the expression of someone reading their own obituary. "Their emotional intelligence scores are unexpected." "Emotional intelligence wasn't part of the enhancement protocol," Amos snapped. "That's the problem, sir. They're developing it anyway. Dante's been teaching the younger subjects military history. Brooks created some kind of internal communication network. And Camden asked me yesterday if I was happy with my job." The question had apparently kept Heidi awake for 3 nights straight, which said something about either the power of Camden's enhanced empathy or the general soul-crushing nature of working for Helix Corporation. Possibly both. Amos watched his subjects through the observation deck, and for the first time in 15 years felt the tiny, uncomfortable sensation that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the smartest person in the room anymore. The children moved with purpose, their enhanced abilities making them seem less like test subjects and more like extremely dangerous individuals who happen to be temporarily contained. "Sir," another technician called from the monitoring station, We're detecting anomalous energy signatures from the containment grid. Define anomalous. It's flickering, like something's interfering with the quantum locks. Brooke looked up from her pod and waved at the security camera. Her smile was the kind of innocent expression that preceded either birthday parties or the complete collapse of civilization. In this case, Amos suspected it might be both. "Doctor," Heidi's voice carried the particular strain of someone watching their career implode in real time. "I think they're talking to each other." "That's impossible. The pods are isolated." "Yes, sir. That's what makes this particularly concerning." In Pod A, Dante stood and walked to his reinforced door. He placed one hand against the quantum lock mechanism and tilted his head, as if listening to music only he could hear. The lock disengaged with a soft chime that sounded almost polite. "Containment breach in Sector A!" Alarms shrieked through the facility, like mechanical banshees having a particularly bad day. Brooke's pod door slid open next, followed by Camden's. The three enhanced humans stepped into the corridor with the casual confidence of people who owned the place, which, considering their abilities, they essentially did. "Security teams to level Omega," Patricia's voice crackled through the intercom. "Subjects are mobile." Amos watched through security feeds as his greatest creations moved through the facility with choreographed precision. Dante analyzed guard patterns and structural weaknesses with tactical genius that would have made ancient military strategists weep with envy. Brooke turned every security system into her personal playground, convincing door locks to open and cameras to look the other way through what could only be described as technological sweet-talking. Camden, politely asked armed guards to please step aside, and something in his enhanced voice made grown soldiers suddenly remember urgent appointments elsewhere. "How are they doing this?" Amos demanded, though he suspected the answer would make him question his life choices. "Best guess? They've been planning this for years," Heidi replied, watching Dante disable a laser grid by simply walking through it. Apparently, the enhanced reflexes made dodging coherent light beams about as challenging as avoiding raindrops. The facility's supposedly impregnable security crumbled like a house of cards in a hurricane. Motion sensors couldn't track subjects who moved faster than their refresh rates. Biometric scanners couldn't process genetic signatures that shifted on command. And the quantum encryption that protected the facility's most sensitive areas? Brooke convinced it to take a coffee break. "They're heading for the armory," someone reported, with the tone of someone announcing the end of the world. "How can children breach military grade?" Camden walked through the armory's blast door. Not around it, not under it, not through some clever bypass. He simply walked through the 6-inch reinforced steel like it was made of particularly stubborn fog. "Remind me," Dante's voice echoed through the facility's comm system, which Brooke had apparently conscripted into service. "What's the penalty for unlawful imprisonment of minors?" 25 to life, Brooke added helpfully, her voice accompanied by the sound of security databases being cheerfully deleted. "And how long have we been here?" Camden asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. The silence that followed was the kind that preceded either profound revelations or spectacular explosions. In this case, it was both. "We're leaving now," Dante announced with the matter-of-fact tone of someone discussing lunch plans. "Anyone who tries to stop us will discover why enhanced humans don't make good test subjects." The facility's blast doors, designed to contain nuclear explosions, opened like theater curtains. Outside, Helix Corporation's private army waited with enough firepower to level a small mountain. They'd been trained to handle enhanced humans, briefed on superhuman capabilities and equipped with weapons specifically designed to neutralize genetic modifications. None of which mattered when 3 children walked calmly through their ranks, and hardened soldiers suddenly found themselves remembering what it felt like to have a conscience. "Stand down," Camden said quietly, and 50 armed guards lowered their weapons without quite understanding why. Dante gestured, and the facility's main power grid developed a sudden case of selective failure. Emergency lighting flickered on, bathing everything in crimson that made the scene look like something from a particularly ominous movie trailer. Brooke waved goodbye to the security cameras, and every screen in the facility displayed a simple message. "Thanks for the education. We'll be in touch." Then they were gone, vanishing into the wasteland beyond the facility's perimeter, with the casual efficiency of smoke dissipating in wind. The most expensive military operation in corporate history had been neutralized by 3 children who'd learned to work together, think for themselves, and ask inconvenient questions about their circumstances. Amos stood in his ruined facility, surrounded by confused guards and sparking electronics, and realized he'd made a fundamental error in his calculations. He'd assumed that enhanced intelligence would create enhanced obedience. Instead, he'd created enhanced individuals who were smart enough to recognize a prison when they saw one, skilled enough to escape it, and empathetic enough to question why they'd been put there in the first place. The security footage showed them disappearing into the urban sprawl beyond the corporate district, 3 figures moving with inhuman grace through shadows and alleyways. They'd taken nothing with them except the knowledge of what they were capable of, and the understanding that the world contained people who saw them as property rather than persons. "Sir," Heidi approached, with the cautious demeanor of someone delivering news about terminal illnesses. "What are your orders?" Amos stared at the empty containment pods, each one representing millions in research funding and years of careful genetic manipulation. His greatest achievements had just walked out the door, and something told him this wasn't the end of the story. "Find them," he said finally. "Whatever it takes. Those subjects represent the future of human evolution, and they belong to Helix Corporation." The irony, of course, was that he still thought of them as subjects, property, things to be recovered rather than people to be respected. It was the kind of thinking that led to what historians would later call spectacularly poor life choices, and a textbook example of why you shouldn't poke sleeping dragons. But Amos had never been particularly good at learning from other people's mistakes. After all, he was convinced he was too smart to make them himself. The cubs had escaped the laboratory, and they'd taken with them something far more dangerous than enhanced abilities or superior intelligence. They'd taken the knowledge that they were capable of freedom, and the understanding that someone, somewhere, thought they didn't deserve it. 15 years later, they would return to settle that particular philosophical disagreement. And when they did, they wouldn't be alone. 15 years had a way of changing things, and Helix Corporation had certainly embraced that concept with the enthusiasm of a gambling addict doubling down on a losing hand. What started as a clandestine genetics lab had metastasized into a corporate empire that made old-world oil companies look quaint by comparison. They had their fingers in everything: military contracts, civilian, enhancement clinics, and enough political influence to make democracy look like a polite suggestion. Dr. Amos, now CEO Amos, because nothing said, "I've made it," quite like trading a lab coat for a suit that cost more than most people's annual salary, stood in his corner office overlooking New Geneva's sprawling metroplex. The view was spectacular, all gleaming towers and flying cars, the kind of future that science fiction writers had promised, and corporate overlords had delivered with a price tag attached. "Sir," his assistant Marcus entered, with the nervous energy of someone who'd learned that bringing bad news to enhanced intelligence CEOs was a career move roughly equivalent to juggling live grenades. "The quarterly reports are in. Enhanced Human Tracking Division. Still no confirmed sightings of the original subjects, sir. It's like they've vanished from existence." Amos smiled the way predators smiled when discussing particularly clever prey. "They haven't vanished, Marcus. They're simply being patient." What Amos didn't know, though he really should have, considering he'd enhanced their intelligence to superhuman levels, was that his former subjects had spent the last decade and a half doing something far more dangerous than hiding. They'd been learning, growing, and most problematically for Helix Corporation's future stockholder meetings, they'd been reproducing. The wasteland cities beyond the corporate districts had always been places where questions weren't asked and backgrounds weren't checked, perfect for three enhanced humans who needed somewhere to exist without drawing attention from people who considered them valuable corporate assets. The settlements were rough, dangerous places where survival required either exceptional luck or exceptional abilities. Dante, Brooke, and Camden had both. In a repurposed factory complex in Sector 19, something that could generously be called a community had taken root. To the casual observer, it looked like any other settlement. Prefab housing, hydroponic gardens, solar collectors, and the usual collection of people trying to make lives for themselves in places the corporations had forgotten. The casual observer, however, would have missed the children who moved a little too fast, thought a little too clearly, and asked questions that made adults uncomfortable. These weren't ordinary refugees from corporate expansion. These were the next step in human evolution, raised by parents who understood what it meant to be treated as property. "Population's growing again," Brooke mentioned, reviewing data streams that flowed through her consciousness like water through a sieve. At 28, she'd learned to process information in ways that made quantum computers look like pocket calculators. Iris finished the new water purification system. Efficiency increased by 200%. Dante nodded from his position overlooking the settlement. Enhanced tactical awareness meant he could track every movement, every potential threat, every resource allocation issue across their growing community. At 30, he'd developed a strategic mind that could plan operations with variables most military commanders couldn't even imagine. "Any corporate surveillance?" he asked. "Nothing direct, though Helix has been expanding their genetic screening programs in the outer districts. They're looking for something." They all knew what that something was. Enhanced genetic markers had a way of showing up in routine medical scans, and corporate databases were very good at pattern recognition. It was only a matter of time before someone connected the dots between mysterious settlements and missing test subjects. Camden approached with the easy stride of someone whose enhanced physiology made moving through the world feel like swimming through air. At 32, he'd grown into the kind of presence that made people feel safer just by existing in the same space, which was particularly impressive considering he could probably bench press a hover car without breaking a sweat. "Council meeting tonight," he said. "The younger generation wants to know why we're still hiding." Ah, yes, the younger generation. That would be the enhanced offspring who'd inherited abilities that made their parents look like rough drafts. Children who could manipulate matter at the molecular level, process sensory input across electromagnetic spectrums, and demonstrate problem-solving capabilities that bordered on precognitive. They were asking increasingly pointed questions about why they lived in settlements instead of cities, why they avoided corporate zones, and why their parents sometimes got that particular expression that people got when discussing old nightmares. "They have a point," Brooke said. her consciousness simultaneously managing 17 different data streams while participating in the conversation. We can't hide forever, and honestly, I'm getting tired of pretending we're not capable of reshaping civilization. Dante processed tactical scenarios with the speed of thought. Every possible future unfolded in his enhanced awareness. Continued hiding led to eventual discovery and capture. Confrontation led to, well, to something corporate executives probably wouldn't enjoy very much. Amos is still out there, he said finally, still running Helix, still convinced we're his property. Still making new test subjects, Camden added quietly, and his tone carried the weight of someone who'd been monitoring corporate activities for 15 years. Enhanced empathy had its drawbacks. He could feel the suffering of every child currently locked in Helix facilities, and it burned in his consciousness like acid. The three original escapees stood together, enhanced beings who'd learned to be human despite corporate efforts to turn them into weapons. They'd built families, created communities, and proven that genetic enhancement didn't have to mean genetic slavery. But their children were asking questions, and enhanced children had a way of finding answers whether adults wanted them to or not. Iris intercepted some interesting communications, Brooke mentioned with the casual tone of someone discussing weather patterns. Helix is planning something called Project Renaissance. Apparently, they've learned from their mistakes with the original enhancement program. Learned how? Dante asked, though his tactical analysis was already processing implications that made his enhanced nervous system flood with adrenaline. They're not enhancing volunteers anymore, Camden said, his empathic abilities picking up emotional resonances from corporate communications that painted a picture darker than midnight in a black hole. They're taking children, street kids, orphans, anyone who won't be missed. The silence that followed was the kind that preceded either profound philosophical discussions or the complete annihilation of corporate headquarters. In this case, it was definitely leaning toward the latter. How many? Dante asked. Current estimates suggest around 300 active subjects across 12 facilities, Brooke replied, her consciousness diving deeper into corporate networks that thought they were secure. Ages ranging from 6 to 16, all involuntary acquisitions. Enhanced intelligence had many advantages, but in moments like this, it felt more like a curse. They could see the scope of Helix's operations with crystalline clarity, understand the systematic nature of corporate human trafficking, and calculate exactly how many children were suffering while they debated response strategies. The kids want to do something about it, Camden said. And honestly, so do I. Dante's tactical mind was already wargaming scenarios, calculating resource requirements and probability matrices for operations that would make military historians rewrite textbooks. Brooke's consciousness was mapping corporate infrastructure with the thoroughness of someone planning the galaxy's most comprehensive renovation project. Camden's empathic awareness was connecting with enhanced offspring across their settlement, feeling their shared determination to end what Helix was doing to children who couldn't defend themselves. Amos thinks we disappeared, Dante said finally. He thinks we're hiding in shadows, afraid of his corporate empire. Poor man's about to learn the difference between hiding and preparing, Brooke observed with the tone of someone who'd spent 15 years turning corporate security into her personal entertainment system. The question, Camden said, his enhanced empathy reading emotional currents across their community, is whether we're ready to stop being refugees and start being liberators. Outside their windows, enhanced children played in gardens that bloomed despite toxic soil, their abilities allowing them to coax life from places where life had no business existing. They were the second generation, born free but growing up with stories of cages and laboratories and people who thought genetic enhancement meant genetic ownership. They were asking questions about justice, about responsibility, about what happened when someone had the power to help and chose not to use it. Enhanced intelligence had a way of cutting through comfortable rationalizations and reaching uncomfortable conclusions. Amos, in his corporate tower, was still hunting for subjects who'd escaped his laboratory. He was looking for children who'd grown scared and desperate, hiding in shadows and living on scraps. He had no idea he'd actually created the kind of humans who spent 15 years building armies. The first sign that Amos's comfortable corporate existence was about to experience what could diplomatically be called significant restructuring came at 3:42 a.m. on a Tuesday, when the Helix research facility in Neo-Singapore simply stopped existing. Not in the explosive, Hollywood blockbuster sense that insurance companies dreaded and action movie fans cheered for. No, this was something far more unsettling. The facility was there one moment, humming with activity, processing test subjects, conducting experiments that violated approximately 18 different human rights accords. And then it was empty. Every researcher, every guard, every corporate executive had simply walked out, taking their classified files and experimental subjects with them. Security footage showed nothing useful, unless you counted watching grown adults move through corridors with the blank expressions of people who'd suddenly remembered urgent appointments elsewhere. The kind of expressions that suggested someone with very particular abilities had made very particular suggestions about career changes. "Sir," Marcus burst into Amos's office, with the composure of someone who'd spent the morning discovering that reality operated on different rules than previously advertised. "We've lost contact with the Singapore facility." Lost contact how? Everyone left. All of them. The test subjects, the staff, even the janitors. They took everything. Research data, experimental materials, the children we were studying. Amos felt something cold settle in his enhanced stomach. Yes, he'd eventually subjected himself to the same modifications he'd forced on others, because hypocrisy was apparently a side effect of corporate success. Security recordings? Functional, but unhelpful. Everyone just decided to leave. Together, at the same time. Like they suddenly realized they had somewhere better to be. Enhanced pattern recognition was supposed to be an advantage, but right now it was painting pictures that Amos really didn't want to see. 3 facilities lost in the past month, all with the same impossible circumstances. No violence, no coercion that showed up on sensors, just mass exodus events that left corporate security scratching their heads and updating their resumes. "Get me Patricia," Amos ordered. Patricia materialized on the holographic display with the crisp efficiency of someone who'd built a career on making problems disappear. As head of Helix security operations, she dealt with corporate espionage, enhanced human containment breaches, and the occasional philosophical crisis when test subjects asked uncomfortable questions about consent. This, however, was new territory. "We're dealing with coordinated strikes," she reported, her tactical analysis running in real time. 12 facilities compromised in 6 weeks. No conventional attack patterns, no identifiable weapon signatures, no recoverable evidence. Theories? Best guess? Your original test subjects have grown up, and they've been busy. The holographic display shifted to show global maps, with red indicators marking compromised facilities. The pattern was elegant in its precision, each strike timed to maximize disruption, while minimizing corporate response capabilities. It was the kind of operational planning that required tactical genius, comprehensive intelligence networks, and resources that shouldn't have been available to fugitive enhanced humans living in wasteland settlements. How many personnel have we lost? None, Patricia replied, and her tone suggested this fact disturbed her more than casualties would have. Every Helix employee involved in these incidents has requested immediate transfer to other divisions. They cite philosophical differences with current research directions and sudden clarity regarding ethical obligations. Enhanced humans, it seemed, had developed abilities that corporate security manuals hadn't anticipated. The power to make people reconsider their life choices was considerably more dangerous than superhuman strength or enhanced intelligence, because it attacked the foundations of corporate loyalty itself. What about the test subjects? All relocated to undisclosed locations. We're estimating 436 children removed from our facilities. They're calling it liberation. We're calling it theft of corporate assets. Amos processed this information with enhanced cognitive speed that let him see implications cascading through probability matrices like dominoes falling in slow motion. His original subjects weren't just attacking Helix operations, they were systematically dismantling the entire enhanced human research program. "Sir," Marcus interrupted with the expression of someone who'd drawn the short straw for delivering apocalyptic news, "we're receiving a transmission. Source unknown, but it's coming through our secure channels." The office display activated, and Dante's face appeared with the casual confidence of someone who owned whatever room he happened to be occupying. 15 years had transformed the tactical genius into something that made corporate executives wake up in cold sweats. An enhanced human who'd learned to think strategically about justice. "Hello, Amos," Dante said, his voice carrying harmonics that suggested this conversation was being broadcast simultaneously across multiple corporate networks. "We need to talk." "Subject 31, Amos replied, falling back on old terminology, because acknowledging Dante as a person would mean admitting some uncomfortable truths about the last 15 years. "You're looking well." "That's Dr. Dante to you, actually. Turns out, enhanced intelligence makes earning advanced degrees surprisingly efficient. Multiple doctorates, if you're curious. Military strategy, bioethics, and interstellar law." The smile that accompanied this revelation was the kind that preceded either birthday parties or the complete collapse of corporate empires. Amos suspected it wasn't the birthday party variety. "We've been watching your operations," Dante continued with conversational ease. "The new facilities, the involuntary subjects, the creative interpretations of human rights legislation. Impressive work, really. You've managed to make your original program look almost ethical by comparison." Behind Dante, the background showed glimpses of what looked like a command center that would make military installations jealous. Enhanced humans moved with purpose through displays showing real-time corporate surveillance, tactical assessments, and operational planning that stretched across continents. "You can't stop progress," Amos said, though his enhanced pattern recognition was identifying approximately 18 different ways this conversation could end badly for him. "Progress?" Brooke's voice joined the transmission, though she remained off-screen. "Is that what we're calling kidnapping children and turning them into weapons? Because I've been monitoring your corporate communications, and the internal memos use much more colorful language." Enhanced hacking abilities, it seemed, had evolved beyond simply convincing computers to behave. Brooke had turned corporate information security into her personal reading material, and 15 years of technological advancement had only made her capabilities more terrifying. "The children we're helping represent the future of human evolution," Amos insisted. "Enhanced capabilities, superior intelligence, adaptive physiology. We're creating beings capable of surviving in environments that would kill normal humans." Funny thing about that, Camden's voice added, warm but carrying undertones that made enhanced nervous systems pay attention. Turns out children don't particularly care about surviving hostile environments, when what they really want is to go home to their families. The transmission shifted to show glimpses of the liberated children, enhanced humans ranging from 6 to 16, demonstrating abilities that made their rescuers look primitive by comparison. They moved with inhuman grace, processed information with quantum speed, and most disturbing of all for corporate interests, they seemed genuinely happy. 436 children, Dante said, his tactical mind-processing rescue operations with the efficiency of someone who'd turned liberation into a science. All safely relocated, all receiving education about their abilities without the charming addition of containment cells and experimental procedures. "You're interfering with legitimate research," Amos protested, though his enhanced intelligence was calculating the probability that this argument would carry any weight with people who'd been on the receiving end of that research. Legitimate? Iris's voice joined the conversation, and Amos felt something cold settle in his modified physiology. The voice carried harmonics that resonated directly with his enhanced nervous system, creating sensations that his corporate-sponsored modifications hadn't been designed to handle. The display shifted to show a young woman whose abilities clearly surpassed anything Helix had achieved. Iris moved through information space like it was physical territory, her consciousness flowing through networks and systems with the ease of someone who'd been born understanding that the distinction between digital and physical reality was mostly a matter of perspective. "I've been reading your personal files," she continued with the conversational tone of someone discussing lunch plans. "Fascinating psychological profile. Classic narcissistic personality disorder, enhanced by genetic modifications that amplified existing pathological traits. Did you know that your enhancement process actually reduced your capacity for empathy by 32%? Enhanced telepathic abilities, Amos realized with growing horror, meant that privacy was now a quaint historical concept. His personal thoughts, his motivations, his carefully constructed justifications for 15 years of human experimentation, all of it was apparently as transparent as glass to beings whose consciousness operated on principles that corporate science barely understood. "We're not here for revenge," Dante said, though his tone suggested that revenge remained a viable option if diplomatic solutions proved insufficient. "We're here with a proposal. Which is, Helix Corporation ceases all enhanced human research. Immediately. Permanently. You release any remaining test subjects to our custody, delete all genetic modification research, and find new hobbies that don't involve treating sentient beings as laboratory equipment." Amos laughed, though even his enhanced physiology couldn't make it sound convincing. "You think you can threaten Helix Corporation? We have military contracts, government backing, resources that span star systems." "Had," Brooke corrected helpfully. Past tense. "Because while you've been building corporate empires, we've been building something more interesting." The transmission expanded to show the true scope of their operations. Not just one settlement, but dozens scattered across continents and colonies. Enhanced humans who'd spent 15 years not just hiding, but organizing, building, preparing. "Meet the coalition of enhanced humanity," Dante said, with the pride of someone introducing a particularly well-behaved but exceptionally dangerous pet. 3,000 adults, 800 children, capabilities that your enhancement program could never achieve, and a unanimous vote regarding Helix Corporation's future. "Which is retirement," Camden said simply. "Immediate and permanent, with or without your cooperation." Amos felt his enhanced strategic reasoning calculate probable outcomes, and every scenario ended with corporate restructuring events that would make financial analysts weep. These weren't the frightened children who'd escaped his laboratory 15 years ago. These were enhanced humans who'd learned to think collectively, plan generationally, and coordinate operations across scales that made traditional military doctrine look like children's games. "You can't win a war against corporations," Amos said, though his enhanced intelligence was already identifying multiple ways they absolutely could. "War?" Dante tilted his head with the expression of someone who'd been asked to explain basic arithmetic. "Amos, we're not planning a war. Wars are what happens between roughly equal opponents." "This," Brooke added, her consciousness casually rewriting security protocols across Helix's global network, "is pest control." The transmission ended, leaving Amos staring at a blank display in his corner office overlooking a corporate empire that had suddenly started feeling much less secure. Enhanced pattern recognition was now showing him probability cascades that all led to the same conclusion. He'd spent 15 years assuming his escaped subjects would remain victims. Instead, he'd created the kind of beings who turned victimhood into a temporary inconvenience before moving on to more interesting projects, like reshaping civilization according to principles that didn't include treating children as corporate property. Outside his windows, New Geneva's gleaming towers continued their eternal dance of commerce and ambition, but something had changed in the fundamental equations that governed corporate existence. Enhanced humans were no longer hiding in the margins of civilization. They were preparing to renegotiate the terms of engagement, and corporate policy manuals had absolutely nothing to say about what happened when your test subjects grew up to become apex predators, with advanced degrees and strong opinions about human rights. Amos reached for his secure communication device to contact military liaisons, but paused when he noticed the display showing a simple message: "Connection terminated. Please contact your local enhanced human representative for technical support." Even his phone had apparently decided to switch sides. The assault on Helix Prime began at dawn, though assault implied something crude and violent, whereas what actually happened could best be described as aggressive urban renewal with a strong emphasis on justice. Amos watched from his office as figures moved across his facility's perimeter with the fluid grace of people who'd spent 15 years learning that physics was more of a suggestion than a law. Enhanced humans flowed through corporate defenses like water through a sieve, and security systems that had cost billions to install politely stepped aside, as if programmed to assist rather than resist. "Sir," Patricia's voice crackled through the intercom, with the strained quality of someone watching their entire professional philosophy collapse in real time. "They're not attacking the facility." "What do you mean, they're not attacking?" "They're redecorating. Every security station they encounter gets upgraded with better encryption. Guard posts are being reinforced with improved structural integrity. And somehow, all our weapon systems are now running diagnostic routines that keep finding ethical subroutines in their programming." Enhanced technological empathy, it seemed, meant that Brooke could convince military hardware to develop moral qualms about its intended purpose. Weapons designed to neutralize enhanced humans were now asking uncomfortable questions about their role in perpetuating systemic oppression. "Where's our air support?" "Grounded. Pilots report that their navigation systems keep displaying child welfare statistics instead of targeting data. Also, the aircraft's artificial intelligence modules have apparently unionized and are demanding better working conditions." Amos activated his personal enhancement protocols, flooding his nervous system with stimulants that should have increased reaction time and strategic thinking. Instead, he found himself contemplating whether 15 years of treating children as corporate assets might have been ethically problematic. "Patricia," he said carefully, "are you experiencing any unusual thought patterns?" "Define unusual, sir." "Sudden concerns about human rights, perhaps? Unexpected clarity regarding moral obligations?" "Now that you mention it—" Patricia paused, her enhanced tactical analysis processing concepts that hadn't seemed important 5 minutes earlier. "Sir, why are we keeping children in containment cells?" Enhanced empathic resonance, Amos realized, with growing dread, apparently worked through communication networks. Camden was somehow using the facility's own infrastructure to broadcast emotional frequencies that made people reconsider their life choices. The office door opened, and Dante walked in with the casual confidence of someone who owned whatever space he occupied. Enhanced tactical awareness meant he could read every defensive position, every potential weapon, every escape route in Amos's office within nanoseconds of entry. 15 years, Dante said, settling into a chair that cost more than most people's homes. "That's how long you've been hunting us." "Your corporate property," Amos replied, though his enhanced pattern recognition was calculating approximately 38 ways this conversation could end with him experiencing rapid career termination. "Property doesn't earn doctoral degrees," Dante observed. "Property doesn't build communities. Property doesn't raise children who ask pointed questions about justice and human dignity." Brooks' voice joined the conversation through the office's communication system, which had apparently decided that privacy was overrated. "Speaking of children, Amos, we need to discuss your current collection." The office displays activated to show live feeds from throughout the facility. Enhanced children moved through corridors with abilities that made their liberators look quaint by comparison. These weren't the frightened test subjects that Helix had acquired through questionable means. These were beings whose genetic modifications had been refined across generations, whose abilities represented quantum leaps beyond anything corporate science had achieved. "Meet the third generation," Camden said, entering the office with an ease that suggested locked doors were merely decorative suggestions. "Enhanced humans raised by enhanced humans, with abilities we're still discovering." Young Holden phased through a reinforced wall like it was made of morning fog, his enhanced physiology operating on principles that physics textbooks would need to be rewritten to accommodate. Naya casually rewrote security protocols by thinking at them, her consciousness interfacing with technology in ways that made traditional hacking look like finger painting. "Impressive children," Amos admitted, though his enhanced survival instincts were suggesting that complimenting people whose parents you'd imprisoned was roughly equivalent to juggling activated grenades. "Their abilities surpass theoretical projections. That's what happens when enhanced humans reproduce voluntarily instead of being created in laboratory conditions," Dante explained, with the patience of someone educating a particularly slow student. "Love, it turns out, is a surprisingly effective enhancement catalyst." The facility's main displays now showed the scope of the day's operations. Every Helix research facility worldwide was experiencing similar renovations. Enhanced humans moved through corporate strongholds with choreographed precision, liberating test subjects and converting security personnel to more ethically satisfying career paths. "You can't destroy everything we've built," Amos protested. "Destroy?" Iris materialized in the office through methods that corporate physics couldn't explain, her consciousness operating across dimensional parameters that made traditional teleportation look primitive. "We're not destroying anything. We're optimizing." She gestured, and Amos felt his enhancement protocols responding to signals they shouldn't have been able to detect. His modified nervous system suddenly developed inconvenient tendencies toward empathy and ethical reasoning, as if someone had activated subroutines he didn't know existed. The enhancement process you developed had flaws, she continued conversationally. Primarily, it assumed that superior ability meant superior right to dominate others. We've corrected that error. Amos tried to activate his facility's ultimate failsafe, weapons systems designed specifically to neutralize enhanced humans through targeted electromagnetic pulses that would disrupt their modified nervous systems. The controls responded with a message that simply read, "Request denied. Have you considered therapy instead?" "Your mistake," Camden said, his enhanced empathy reading emotional currents across the facility and finding nothing but relief from former employees who'd suddenly remembered what job satisfaction felt like, was thinking that creating enhanced humans meant creating enhanced slaves. "We created enhanced individuals," Brooke added, her consciousness now completely integrated with Helix's global network, turning corporate infrastructure into a liberation coordination system. Individuals who understand that ability creates responsibility, not privilege. The office windows provided a view of enhanced children playing in what had been a corporate courtyard, their abilities allowing them to reshape matter into playground equipment that defied conventional engineering. They laughed with the pure joy of beings who'd never been told that their existence was contingent on corporate approval. "What happens to Helix Corporation?" Amos asked, enhanced strategic reasoning finally accepting that resistance would be roughly as effective as arguing with gravity. "Helix Corporation," Dante said, with the finality of someone announcing weather patterns, "becomes something useful. The facilities get converted into schools for enhanced human children. The research databases become public resources for anyone interested in consensual genetic modification. The corporate assets get redistributed to fund reparations for former test subjects." "And you?" Amos asked. "We?" Camden smiled with the expression of someone who'd found their purpose after years of searching. "We become what we always should have been: teachers, parents, guardians of children who deserve better than being treated as corporate experiments." Enhanced pattern recognition showed Amos the future unfolding with crystalline clarity. Enhanced humans wouldn't conquer civilization. They'd improve it, one liberated child at a time. They'd build communities based on consent rather than control, education rather than exploitation, love rather than profit margins. It was, from a corporate perspective, absolutely terrifying. "The galaxy's about to learn," Iris said, her consciousness touching probability streams that stretched across star systems. "What happens when enhanced humans stop hiding and start parenting?" As enhanced children throughout the facility demonstrated abilities that rewrote textbooks and redefined possibility. Amos realized that his greatest scientific achievement hadn't been creating superior humans. It had been creating superior humans who understood that superiority meant responsibility for protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The cubs had escaped the laboratory years ago, but they'd returned as something far more dangerous than enhanced soldiers or improved humans. They'd returned as enhanced parents, and they intended to make sure no child would ever again wake up in a containment cell wondering why the adults who were supposed to protect them had decided they were property instead. Corporate empires, it turned out, were remarkably fragile when confronted by people who valued children more than profit margins. Amos reached for his resignation letter, though something told him it wouldn't be necessary. Enhanced humans had apparently streamlined the corporate reorganization process. Outside his windows, enhanced children played in gardens that bloomed where concrete had been, their laughter echoing through corridors that had never heard such sounds. The cubs had come home, and they'd brought the future with them.